back, everybody. It is the Working Brother back at you with another talk. Yet again, we've got Dragoljub Bosnić. How you doing, Drago? Our weekly catch up with you has been a little bit overdue. You were on holiday. How was your holiday? You look rested.
Yeah, I look rested. Hopefully, it was great. It was great. I can't complain about anything.
Excellent. How you feeling? You good to be? You back in Serbia? Happy to be back?
Yeah, it's always good to be back.
Excellent. Let's get into some of the news. There's been a lot of stuff that's been going on, and some of the articles that you sent me, even though they're actual serious articles, they made me giggle as I was loading them up for this. Everybody who's new, the usual disclaimer: this is a comedy show, has nothing to do with reality. If you don't like me interrupting the guests, you're free to leave anytime you want. This is not an interview show. This is a talk show. We talk to each other, and that includes interjections. In fact, so much so that I've been told that by some of the subscribers on the Telegram channel that they watch this with their family. So this is now officially a family comedy show, I would guess. So yeah, let's take it away with some of this NATO humor that we've got lined up. Where is Both Plus TV? There we go. U.S. think tanks tell us that Russia is unlikely to run out of missiles. No.
I like how you giggled when you said think tanks. Like you giggled before you said tanks. So yeah. Think tanks. I mean, oftentimes they're ridiculous. I mean, they're more like propaganda outlets than actual think tanks. You know, like if it's a think tank, you would probably like expect it to be run by people who know what they're talking about, or people that are familiar with the topics they're covering. Yeah. But oftentimes,
like special experts,
Yeah, pundits or experts of some kind, but. Oftentimes they're just propaganda outlets, and even if they tell the truth, they have to put it into the propaganda narrative, so that they could keep it alive, I guess. And even in this case, that's exactly the point. In this article, I covered one of the let's say research pieces that was published by the Center for Strategic and International Studies, which is a Washington-based think tank, and
essentially.
CSIS, exactly. So what they argued is that Russia will never run out of missiles, which is extremely rare to hear in American media. Obviously, they put it they put the entire narrative into the propaganda story about Russia not having enough technological or other resources to produce missiles. And then of course they also said that Russia needs the help of Iran. To have long-range strike capabilities, which to me is ridiculous, to be honest. I argued actually in the article that one of the reasons why Russia got Iranian drones is their extreme cost-effectiveness. So essentially, when you get these drones, the Russians have actually started producing them, and they've added their own technologies on these drones, giving them greater capabilities. But the point is, the main reason why they're using these Iranian-sourced drones is their cost effectiveness. Like you get a lot bigger bang for the buck. So that's the whole point. But the thing is,
leopard worth of bang.
Exactly.
Export prices.
Yeah. But like the whole point is, they admitted that Russia has the technological capacity to produce these drones. Well, I mean, maybe not forever, but like for a very, very long time, and that nobody can actually jeopardize that because the Russian army, the Russian military actually made sure that the production is like concentrated in Russia entirely. So there's not a single part for these long-range missiles that the Russians are making that is actually sourced from the outside. So it's all made in Russia. So like they have nothing to worry about in that regard.
It's become an industrial warfare type of thing, and the West is failing. I think that's become clear to even the most casual observer. The next article that we have lined up is about hypersonic missiles, keeping in with the missile topic.
Yeah.
Tell us what this means. Well, we know
Yeah.
what it means, but
Yeah. So this plays into the what you already mentioned, that the Russians have a very robust industrial capability. So, and that they're actually winning, and that the West doesn't have that capability. And once again, this is another proof that that all the narrative about Russia being like the 25th world economy or whatever, or like having the economy the size of Spain or less, it's ridiculous, because that's not how you really measure an economic output and real economic power. So, like for Russia, to be able to rearm half of its strategic missile divisions with hypersonic warheads, like that's the proof of its true technological and industrial might. Because the U.S. has not been able to do that. The U.S. has not been able to produce a single hypersonic weapon, and they've had a lot of issues with that for years, actually for decades at this point. So, and the Russians have not only been able to beat the U.S. in this race, but they've actually deployed half of their strategic missiles with hypersonic warheads, which means that they can maneuver, and like each warhead on the missile can essentially behave like a separate missile. It can maneuver, it can hit a different target. So that increases the Russian strategic might exponentially, and the U.S. has nothing to respond to that.
Game over.
Yeah, essentially.
That's why the U.S. is rage quitting. I want the U.S. to rage quit, just like Alt F4, exit game. I think that's what we're going for here.
Yeah,
that would be excellent on the global scale.
They do that daily in the Russia Lost Simulator, I guess.
Moving on from the U.S. to the U.K. Lol. What does this even mean?
Yeah, it's like the shortest way to describe that is that they're asking the Ukrainians to pamper those tanks, and that's ridiculous, because they're seeking guarantees from the Ukrainian government that these Challenger 2 tanks, like these tanks which have been touted as like probably the best tanks in NATO apart from the Leopard 2 tanks. They're asking guarantees from the Ukrainian government, from the active Zelensky regime, that none of these tanks get destroyed. So can you imagine asking something like that from a country that has lost more than 1,500 tanks of its own and hundreds of other tanks that NATO sent over the last year and a half? So that such guarantees, like who could give such guarantees fighting a country like Russia or any country at all? I mean, the Turks lost tanks to ISIS. Like, why would anyone ask guarantees, fighting against a country like Russia? It's just ludicrous. So some of the demands that I've seen coming from London to Kiev, it's beyond laughable. Like they're asking
Did
them
you
not
know?
to.
I'm guessing you did, but this one's trivia for the subscribers. Did you know that the Challenger tank has a tea boiling pot inside?
Yeah.
And the theory for that is so they don't have to go outside to cook their tea. I wonder what the Russians will think of that once they capture some challengers. It's hilarious what you're saying. It's impossible to think of a main battle tank going into battle and not getting damaged. Like even in a video game, the whole point of a main battle tank is to be in battle, and being in battle brings up risks. You know what I mean? Especially when you're going up against the superior force, as you say, which has air power and other things. So yeah, the British are quite funny.
Yeah, it's funny because what they're asking them is don't put the tanks in the front lines, but also don't put them far away from the front lines where they could be spotted and destroyed by Russian long-range weapons. So in other words, just dig them in, dig a hole in the ground, put them there, and wait for the end of the war. So it's ridiculous.
Put them in a bunker. Put them in a bunker, but make sure it's deeper than 82 meters underground so that the Kinjal can't hit it.
Exactly.
Yeah, no comment.
It's ridiculous. I mean, I really don't understand what's the whole point of having a tank you can't use. It's actually more damaging because you have to take care of it, right? So just return it to the sender and be done with it, I guess.
Biden administration obstructing Ukraine aid audits. Who's surprised?
Yeah, shocking.
Share, and comment if you're surprised. Like unbelievably. um,
Shocking, really like unexpected. I don't know how that came to be. But in all seriousness, it shows that even this Republican dominated Congress is not really like this anti-establishment institution now, as has been touted by many pro-Republican media in the U.S. Like it's ridiculous because the Republican dominated Congress can actually create these institutions that are going to audit the aid for Ukraine, but they're not doing it. They're not doing it, and they're not doing it because they're afraid of Biden. I mean, who the hell is afraid of Biden? The point is,
I heard some news recently that there was some military accounting office, MAOE or MEAO, I don't know, something like that was getting like dissolved basically by the army itself or by the U.S. government itself because it was supposed to keep track of overspending for the littoral combat ships, and they went over budget and are like underperforming and are not going to be adopted anyway or commissioned or whatever it's called, and the whole accounting office is being scrapped. So
yeah. Actually, I argued that in the article. There was this previous General Inspector John Sopko, who was like this. He was like the special investigative organ for Afghanistan, and this guy, like, his job was to like audit, all the money going into Afghanistan and for the U.S. and NATO military forces there. And like his statements would usually embarrass the U.S. Congress and the U.S. Army and the U.S. military.
I have to
NATO
ask which years of the 20 years in Afghanistan was he?
Yeah, I think it was from 2011 or 2010 to 2021. I'm not sure, like,
okay,
exactly.
so like the second half, yeah.
Yeah, it was the second half of the war. So like that was the time when like there was a lower number of American soldiers there than in the previous decade. So we can assume that the numbers for the previous decade were way worse. But the numbers that he released were staggering anyway. So like we can only like guess how much money was stolen in the previous decade, and we can only guess how much money is being stolen now in Ukraine, given that the aid for Ukraine is like manyfold greater than the money spent in Afghanistan. So
listen, my first time, I'm an economist by trade. Like I studied accounting and finance, and when I worked in a law firm, at one point, the owner, boss, manager guy was Arab American, and he told me that it's not stealing; it's called kickbacks. That's where I first learned the term. I hadn't ever heard of the term kickbacks, and so basically it's kickbacks. It's like the things that are never going to Ukraine. You know what I mean? Everybody's getting their cut before it even gets there. But then again, this is nothing new.
That explains why they don't want audits, because like if you have audits, the kickbacks are going to be lower. So you don't want that, obviously. If you're
it's not only that, but remember that, like, what was it, 2.4 billion or something that went to Prigozhin before the coup? How are they going to audit that? Yeah, we're still of the belief that wasn't a coup here. If you think it was a coup, leave your reasons in the comments. We like trolls. All trolling and hate is welcome. We love the haters the most. They drive the algorithm. And be sure to leave a comment. If you're going to unsubscribe and you hate my interruptions, make sure to tell me. Leave a comment. Why Russia might retire its Peter the Great nuclear-powered battlecruiser. Is this of the same class that the Moskva was?
No, this one is bigger. Like this is the so-called Kirov class battlecruiser.
Right.
There were 4 of them, and the Soviet Union built only 4 of them. 2 of them were scrapped, and these last 2, the Admiral Nakhimov and the Pyotr Veliki or Peter the Great, it was supposed to go under some kind of reconstruction and modernization, but the Russian military decided it's going to scrap that one too. So the ship is extremely powerful. The ship is, heavily armed. It can carry hundreds of missiles of various kinds, including the latest hypersonic ones. However, the Russian military is changing its doctrine. And one of the reasons why they're changing it is because these ships are way too large, making them a very easy target. Also, they're nuclear powered, which can cause, in terms of destruction, it can cause a lot of hazard. What they're doing now is they're buying hundreds of new corvettes and frigates, which can carry the exact same weapons, but
And by
like
buying, you mean creating them
yeah,
locally?
yeah, like producing them. I mean, the Russian military is buying them, but the Russian industry is producing them. So the
Yeah.
point is like frigates like the Admiral Gorshkov, which we mentioned before, that one frigate which spooked the entire NATO. Like you can produce maybe 10 or 15 of these frigates for the price of a single battle cruiser. So why would you do that and just lose a single cruiser, which is a major target, when you can just produce 15 of these and just put them in various locations, spread them out and ensure that destruction of one isn't catastrophic as the loss of a single large battle cruiser. So that's one of the reasons why the Russians are scrapping all these like plans for major ships, because they already have like unstoppable anti-ship missiles like the Zircon, a hypersonic missile. They can destroy like even aircraft carriers. So like the point is you have to change your naval doctrine, considering how powerful the missiles are becoming, and like the smaller the ships are, the lesser of a priority target they are. So that's why the Russians are like moving towards creating these smaller vessels than the big ones.
It's kind of like with the drone warfare thing that's going on. Instead of building like planes and helicopters to take out tanks and missiles, you just build little geranium drones.
Yeah,
Basically.
exactly. It's way more cost effective, and these platforms can carry the same hypersonic missiles, which means they're is equally as deadly as a big battle cruiser.
Yeah. All right. I want to take a little commercial break of sorts and inform people that from now you can also find me on Buy Me a Coffee. So there will be a link down below, and you can now buy me a coffee if you feel like it. All right. There's also the Patreon. You should already know that. But that link is also there if that is what you prefer. Now, after that commercial break is over, let us go to the next article here. Oh boy. Yeah. Who's shocked by this? I saw an article today that in order for like Ukraine to like grow again or become like a normal society, they need something like 3 or 30, like whatever it is, but it's a lot of million of women to come back to Ukraine, and those women are probably not going to come back to Ukraine.
Yeah.
Tell us about the demographic collapse of Ukraine.
Yeah, I mean, when I wrote that, I wasn't like boasting about it. Obviously, I wrote it just from an objective perspective, and it's just
Scientific,
sad.
yeah.
It's really sad considering what sort of a country Ukraine was before the Soviet Union collapsed. Oftentimes, these neo-Nazi elements in the or Nazis or Nazis, as you said.
Yeah. Fans of nuts.
Yeah, fans of nuts. These fans of nuts, like what they often claim is that the Russians have always tried to destroy Ukraine, try to enslave it, try to destroy its
The
people.
Golodomor and Holodomor and all those
Yeah,
mores.
exactly. So the point is like, why would the Russians then create one of the most prominent republics in the USSR, like republics which actually had the best missile technologies, the best factories for high tech stuff? Why would like they let Ukraine inherit 30% of the Soviet military, like which was the most powerful military force in the history of man when the Soviet Union collapsed? So it's ridiculous to claim that Ukraine was somehow duped or tricked, by Moscow all these decades before the collapse. Um, the point is like it was like a premier country or a republic inside the Soviet Union. But as soon as the Soviet Union collapsed, Ukraine collapsed with it, and not just demographically, but in every sense of the word, like economically, in industrial terms, and as a result, also demographically. So they lost like 10 million people between the 1991 and 2014. So there was no war back then, like of any kind,
Yeah.
and like they still lost all these people. So the point is, like, what happened to cause such a dramatic demographic decline? And then, of course, the war happened. I mean, the war started in 2014, and it wasn't started by Russia. And since then, Ukraine has lost like millions of people more. So at this point, like at this time, the biggest number they can think of people living in Ukraine is 31 million. So like since 1991 to 2023, they lost almost half of their population. So from 52 to approximately 28 to 31 million now. So like
Let's not forget. Let's not forget it was also like human trafficking capital of the world before any of this
yeah,
started.
yeah,
So
like
there's that
not
too,
to
you know.
mention that, like there were hundreds of thousands of Ukrainian women who ended up in the sex slave market in the West and the Middle East and elsewhere. Like it was a total collapse of the society. So like they should have prayed for the Soviet Union to last for as long as possible, because when the Soviet Union existed, none of this was happening. Like they didn't have any of that. And as soon as it happened, as soon as the Soviet Union collapsed, they had all that. I mean, freedom and democracy came into their country in full swing. So, like, and now this war, I mean, the SMO, which was like the Russian
Hmm.
counteroffensive to NATO aggression in Europe,
Yeah.
came like the icing on the cake, so to speak, uh, which destroyed Ukraine demographically completely. So the only people that are left in Ukraine now, or the majority of them, are older people. And that's like a demographic disaster for any country, not to mention the economic consequences and everything else, because like you can't have more pensioners than workers. And that's
Hmm.
exactly what's happening in Ukraine now.
Um, moving on from Ukraine to Deutschland. Yeah. One of the recurring topics here, as it is one of the victims of American aggression. Random Ukraine affiliated terrorist groups who bombed the Nord Stream. Um, German deindustrialization continues unabated.
Yep. Like
Genocidal
this
energy policies? What do you mean?
yeah, like this is propaganda, obviously, but aside from that, the interesting thing is, like, I actually quoted a German business guy in this article. His name is Haag, Haag. I suppose that's how you pronounce his name in English, last name. And he's the CEO of the Voigt Group. And
Hmm.
this guy essentially like said that Germany is deindustrializing, partially because Germany is like using a lot of these like new green deals and new like green laws, which are like disabling the German industry, because obviously they can't have like
It's okay. I think you can say retarded here. they're, they're backwards. That's what retarded means. Backwards is retarded. Like to retard something is to pull it back. So
exactly.
these are definitely retarding and retarded policies.
Yeah, yeah, and
Great.
that's a perfect description. Basically, what they're doing is that like they're like retarding their own industrial and economic might. So like, why would you do that? Well, I mean, I don't know, unless you're actually working against your country. And now they're realizing that these so-called renewables cannot really produce a constant flow of energy, and this is what industry needs. So like they're enforcing these green deals and laws, and they've also cut themselves off from Russian gas. So like, what are you going to do? Like, you don't
They're
coal power.
hanging themselves while shooting themselves in the foot. That's what I
Yeah,
think the technical term would be.
yeah, yeah. Like that's the only way you can describe it. Like I don't understand why would they do that, but still they're doing it, and as a result, it's not just that they're losing foreign investment. They're like the domestic German industry is actually outsourcing itself from Germany and going to other countries where they can actually work and they can operate without any issues. So Germany is industrializing itself while actually going for war with Russia. And I think this is the next article, exactly the one that
Yeah.
you just showed. Like they're moving towards the confrontation with Russia while deindustrializing themselves. So I'm sure that's going to end up very, very well for them, just like the last time again.
Yeah, I was just gonna say last time they didn't plan it like that, but that's how it turned out. And I was discussing with a friend of mine that it was their basically focus on the Wunderwaffe and the extremely technical and scientific solutions to problems where the Soviets then and the Russians now then with T-34s and now with Giran drones and FPV drones, they're just pumping that out, and it's become industrial warfare of sorts. Tell us what else is said in this Drag nach Osten article.
Yeah. Drag nach Osten would be the term that the Germans have been using for over 100 years now. That was the plan before the World War I, but actually, especially at the time of the World War I, they were trying to move to the east and take as much land from Russia as they could. And it seems they've never given up that plan. They did it again in World War II, and they couldn't have done it during the Cold War, but now it seems that this plan is resurgent, and they're moving troops to the Baltic states, specifically to Lithuania, approximately 4,000 of them. The Russians are not going to be spooked by 4,000 soldiers, but the point is this is a symbolic start of another Drag nach Osten, which the Germans are obviously trying to do again. And once again, I don't see how they could hope to succeed, given the fact that the Russians have beaten every single Drag nach Osten so far for over 1,000 years, if I'm not mistaken, and that was before they had 6,000 nuclear weapons. So why do they think be better than any time before? So that's the confusing part about it, to be honest.
Going off topic, since you mentioned nuclear weapons, it reminded me of Belarus, because on the way to Russia, you got to go through Belarus. And we've had Lukashenko say that he has problems with Wagner, trying to calm them down so they don't go on an expedition to Poland and visit Warsaw. They want to go visit Warsaw. What do you make of Wagner wanting to visit Warsaw and Lukashenko trying to calm down Wagner?
Yeah, obviously that's trolling. But on the other hand, I think what they might be doing is the same thing that the Reagan administration was trying to do to the Soviet Union. So they try to cause panic in the Soviet Union during the 80s, which forced the Soviet Union to overspend during that time and not focus on other stuff in the society and the economy. So what they're probably doing now is trolling countries like Poland to actually start overspending, and that's exactly what Poland is doing now. They actually have a bunch of these new deals with South Korea to buy new tanks and jets and so on. The point is these tanks, no matter how advanced or supposedly advanced they are, they're extremely expensive. Those are the most expensive tanks and jets in the world in that class of vehicles and aircraft. So Poland, what it's doing now, it's also in a sort of a deindustrialization, because it's it also has consequences due to the economic warfare against Russia. So it's becoming this border area, which is not going to enjoy economic prosperity anymore, but it's becoming a military frontier. And every society in history that has become a military frontier actually went poor. That's inevitable. And now they're overspending on the military. So how is that going to end up, looking for their economy and their society? So I think that's one of the things that Lukashenko is trying to accomplish. Wagner doesn't need to do anything. It's enough for them to be there. And Poland is going to overspend, and then waste enormous resources on the military.
So it's like a double bluff, basically.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a double bluff. And only Poland is the one that has issues with that. And Poland doesn't have nukes. Belarus now does. So they can defend against an invasion with nuclear weapons. Poland, on the other hand, doesn't have them. So they have to rely on conventional forces. And this is usually much more expensive.
Aren't American F-35As stationed in Poland?
they were stationed, but they officially they didn't carry any nuclear weapons. Although I think they might be they might start transferring those to Poland if they haven't already.
So U.S. Nuclear weapons are like in Germany, furthest east, basically.
They're in Germany. Supposedly the Americans were supposed to keep their end of agreement even after Germany reunified. They were supposed to keep their nuclear weapons only in the western part of Germany, not like deploy them in former DDR. So the thing is like I don't know. I can't like confirm if this is still the case, but I know Poland is asking Americans to deploy their nuclear weapons. I'm not sure if they already did that. Like it's very possible they have, but I can't confirm that 100%.
Hmm.
But if they didn't, and they're like thinking about it, that's going to be a major escalation for the Russians because now they will have nuclear weapons bordering Russian nuclear weapons because the Russians have nuclear weapons both in Poland and in the Kaliningrad region. So I
Hmm.
mean, if that's not a danger zone area, I don't know what is.
Um, Speaking of danger zones, yesterday or the day before, the U.S. lol, no, not the U.S. The Russian Air Forces, or Aerospace Forces as they're officially called, struck a port on the Danube, like 30 meters or something away from Romania. And NATO was just like, okay, no problem. um,
But what are
Zelensky didn't like it. Tell us
yeah,
about his whining.
yeah. Zelensky always whines, but this whining was the most obvious one of all, and I'm sure many people have seen the images of him in that summit. We could see that he was exceedingly happy about the results. I mean, in all seriousness, you could see his face. I mean, it tells you everything you need to know about
Yeah.
what they did, right? So effectively, they've told him like, we can't get you into NATO. We can, however, like speed up the process by removing the so-called Membership Action Plan or MAP. We can remove that requirement, and Ukraine can negotiate, the membership faster now. However, there's a small caveat. You just have to defeat the Russians. That's it. That's all you have to do. So it's very easy for Ukraine to get into NATO, I guess.
Yeah. It should happen within the next 25 to 500 years. Um, Now we're going to visit something that's a little bit stale, but we've got some new information here. What? What do you mean they lied? How can
Yeah, like
the
shocking, I
U.S. lie?
guess.
What are you talking about?
Yeah,
Chinese spy balloon lies? Tell us. Were
that
they
was
actually
actually
satellites?
like a briefing in the Pentagon. I think it was on June 28th. I'm not sure exactly. And I was reading through it. I wrote the article in early July, and I was reading through it, and I found this line where the guy, one of the Pentagon guys, said, like, "Oh, we didn't actually find any. Or we forgot to say, but when we, retrieved all the remains of the balloon, we didn't find any spy equipment." And we have no proof that the Chinese were doing anything but actually, collecting weather data. So, like, they really shot down a weather balloon with a $430,000 dollars worth of missiles. Actually, multiple missiles. It wasn't just one. And they were using the F-22 for that. The exceedingly cost-effective American aircraft, one of the cheapest in the history of mankind, I guess.
Yep, yep. Bang for buck, like nothing else.
Yeah.
Um, we got more China articles. China heads back at entire West industries with rare earth elements restrictions. I know what this can mean, but why don't you explain it for the viewers? What
Yep.
rare earth elements are and why China has a monopoly.
Yeah, like China can ban a plethora of these rare earth elements, but in this specific case, it was gallium and germanium. So those two are very important in the semiconductor industries and production of chips and other like
Hmm.
semiconductor based products, which obviously is very important for high tech industries. Like they can't essentially exist without these things. So I think this was just a warning shot because the Chinese can do much more than this, but like this was like a warning shot to the West. Hey, this is what we can do, and you better watch what you're doing. And also, interestingly, this has actually affected the American and the NATO military-industrial complex because the so-called AISA radars, or the active electronically scanned array radars, which are the most advanced radars in operation and wider operation in the world, they are dependent very much on these on gallium and germanium for the production of these like radars. You can't produce any like new semiconductors for the radars if you don't have enough of this thing. China is not the only producer, obviously, but the point is like they are a major producer and they produce like anywhere between 80 and 95%, depending on the source I've seen. And even if we take the lower number, 80%, like you have to use the rest of the 20% to buy these things and then produce AESA radars.
Yeah.
Now, if, as we know, the F-35 and other American aircraft are very expensive. So they're going to get way more expensive now that they have like lesser resources to produce these AESA radars. So the Chinese are essentially targeting Western military industries in this case, and also like firing warning shots about the rest of the industries, which are like more civilian. I think the West will, I hope the West will get the message. Otherwise, they're going to get themselves into a lot of trouble in terms of economics.
Speaking of the West getting the message, and China sending it loud and clear, tell us about China's pushback against NATO aggression in the Pacific.
Yeah. Yeah, like one of the things that the NATO mentioned in its latest Vilnius summit was that they effectively and actually officially, not just effectively but officially, they've declared China a security threat, and they've mentioned they will move into the region, the Asia Pacific region, where they will like effectively like make other American vassals in the area their own members. So I suppose that NATO will start this transition at some point in the future, maybe like sooner than we think, and that all these countries will become part of NATO or whatever the organization is going to be called at that point. So China has vowed to push back against this, and they already started doing that. Like last month, when they started deploying additional forces, Chinese forces in Cuba. So the Chinese are actually opening bases in Cuba to show America that America is not the only country that can actually get into someone else's backyard. So I guess China is going to continue doing this, and especially expanding in the Latin America, where the Americans will not be able to sustain their so-called Monroe Doctrine, which they have been like upholding for the last 200 years. And when that happens, they will finally get the taste of their own medicine, I guess.
Comedy break, because this is a comedy show. This was sent in by Madness. Let's say, dear subscriber who's been around since the time that I was in Russia, and he sent this in. I just wanted to publicize it. Some people might know the CIG Telegram channel. It's like counterintelligence group or something like that. It's very boring, very like, you can tell it's loaded with narrative. So yeah. Everybody who's not on Working Brothers Telegram, the link is in the description, like with everything else. Moving right along, why is the political West not interested in Ukraine's NATO membership?
Yeah, I think that perfectly ties into why Zelensky is extremely frustrated. And what I argued in that article is that the current state of Ukrainian NATO relationship is perfect for the West, because the Ukrainians have all the commitments of a NATO member, but no benefits. So they have to fight for the NATO's cause, but they're not getting anything from NATO, and including the so-called aid, because the aid they're getting is actually credit. Like it's they will have to pay it back at some point if there is a viable.
It sounds like a cruel joke, man. It sounds like a cruel joke.
Yeah. I mean, it is funny unless you're Ukrainian and unless like you care about Ukrainians in any way, as the West claims it does so much. It's really ridiculous to even think that there's anything the West does for the sake of Ukraine, because they're essentially just pushing them on Russian lines and like forcing them to go on the offensive when they can't possibly do that. When they can't actually inflict any sort of major losses on the Russians that are going to create any meaningful results. So what I argued is that just NATO is going to keep pushing Ukraine to death and certain destruction, and they will not care, for the consequences, because they're not the ones that they will have to rebuild the country. Even if they do, even if they're going to rebuild the country at some point, which I highly doubt it's ever going to happen. But even if they do, like, they're going to make a lot of money out of it, and they're going to, take whatever is left of Ukraine.
Yeah, they're not going to be rebuilding Ukraine. Maybe Poland, but not Ukraine. Yeah. Considering the way things are going, I think Poland is lining itself up to be next in line, really too quick for my liking. But they're getting louder and louder and more and more annoying. This is a little bit out of sync, but Kissinger's Sino-Soviet split 2.0 destined to fail. Man, China is like the future of the New World Order. They like have human control. They're like the evil ones. They're working with the New World Order and Kissinger, man. Tell me I'm wrong.
Yeah. Essentially, that's the point. Like, Kissinger, as we all know, he was one of the designers of the so-called Sino-American Detente, which was like the ease of tensions between China and the United States in the 70s. So, like, I mean, Kissinger, despite what we may think of him, obviously, I'm not a big fan of Kissinger, but I have to admit that he was a top diplomat at the time of his tenure in the U.S. government, and he was able to essentially single-handedly ensure that China is out of the Soviet bloc. Obviously, the Sino-Soviet split contributed to this very much, but he was able to exploit that further, diminishing relationship between the USSR and China. So, but that was in the 70s, and like now this is a drastically different situation. So what I think happened is that this American government and the Biden administration, whatever you want to call it, they tried to use Kissinger's, let's say, influence in China to see how they can like create a sort of rift between Russia and China. Obviously, like, he failed because, as I said, now it's it's a vastly different situation, and everything that Washington D.C. is doing is actually pushing China closer to Russia. So, like, no Kissinger or whoever, no matter how good of a diplomat he or she is not going to change that, because like the Chinese see what's going on, and they will not, like, no matter how much they respect Kissinger, they will not actually they will not listen to him, because first of all, he's not in any capacity to represent the U.S. government officially, because he's not an official anymore. And it's just a proof that America doesn't have any more, high quality people that it can use. Like, this geriatric government in America that's already present is already incapable of doing anything. And now they're like forced to send a 100-year-old guy, because Kissinger now is 100 years old, to China to see what he can do, and he can't do anything because, like, it's not the same country anymore.
We've done all of the serious articles that you've sent along. Now we can get into like the stuff that's more controversial for all the people who have stuck around to the end. You know me, I'm a proponent of the fact that weather control exists. You are from Serbia, where I am also from, and recently, other than our, what is Vulin? Is he the Minister of Defense? Being sanctioned.
The head of the Serbian intelligence now. The BIA,
okay, so yeah. Okay, so he's the head of intelligence now. He's been sanctioned by the U.S. Nobody knows what for, but the point is, I mean, it's because he went to Russia recently, but like realistically, nobody knows what it's about. And we've also had a couple of storms here recently that have been anything but natural. Let's put it that way. This is like a huge storm front that came by the other day, and the timing is like impeccable. It's quite weird, and the intensity was insane, and it just reminded me of long time ago. I don't know if you remember. This is a screenshot from like I think 2014 or something like that. When was Obama elected? Yeah,
Yep.
no, 2012. 2012. So this is before the Obama election, and if you remember, all three states up here north didn't end up having their votes counted because of the storms messing with the voting and blah blah, electricity and blah blah.
Yep.
So my question to you, as a fellow, comedian, how likely do you think it is that we are also being subjected to weather warfare and control here in the Balkans because of our
I think
political
it's-
views?
I think it's extremely likely. We just have to take that into account. And it's not just that. Like during the recent NATO summit, I've actually heard one of the guys, like experts in various types of irregular warfare. I forgot his name. I'm going to have to check that later. But like he was talking openly about ethnic-based weapons, about biological weapons which target specific groups, and not just like ethnic groups, but also specific people, as a way to fight future wars. So if they're doing that, like, why wouldn't they control the weather? I mean, controlling the weather provides like various tactical advantages, and biological warfare kills people. So like, it's less serious than biological warfare. So why wouldn't they do it? Like, it would be ridiculous not to think they would be capable of that, considering the fact that they're using biological weapons so easily. So I mean, it's very, very likely, in my opinion.
Glad to hear it. Anything else you'd like to point out, draw attention to before we round this off?
Yeah, I think I've said more than enough for this show.
All right. I'd like to thank everybody who stuck around to the end. Let me play some music. A special thank you goes out to the patrons and those of you who have already bought me a coffee. Link in the description. You can buy me another coffee. This is how you power the show. Have a good one, everyone. See you soon.